Good day, dear colleagues. We're starting our traditional annual press conference of Sergey Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister, and I pass the floor over to him immediately. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to once again welcome you to our traditional meeting that is dedicated to taking stock of foreign policy events of the past year. It was a difficult year, and all of our partners in the international arena agree that today we're witnessing growing pace of international life. It's becoming all the more evident that the world has entered the era of thorough transformation. Geopolitical landscape is radically evolving, and those changes are accompanied by the growing turbulence, both globally and regionally. We're also seeing accumulation of crisis events in the global economy. I'm sure you're well aware of all of that, and you're following closely. In those conditions, Russia strived to ensure international stability, step up, search for collective solutions to issues that the global community is facing. In his address to the Federal Assembly on the 22nd December last year, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev highlighted that Russian foreign policy has become more modern, aimed at modernizing the country, ensuring security of Russia, and establishing partnership relations with other countries in the interest of our citizens, striving to improve socio-economic situation, ensuring their rights in foreign states and their prosperity in general. Will continue further improving the stance of Russia as one of the major centers of power and increase the influence of the new polycentric arrangement of the world. One of the important outcomes of the past year is advancement of integration processes on the CIS space. I would like to note an important step that was taken. I'm referring to the signing by the CIS member states the agreement on the free trade area, talking about post-Soviet space. I also want to highlight steps to broaden alliance relations within CSTO, as well as arrangement between Russia, Kazakhstan and Belarus from shifting to the single economic space as of January 1st this year. First time a supernatural national body is being set up, Eurasian Commission, and we are moving towards establishing Eurasian Economic Council in the year 2015. Integration Council that had been set up by the three parties are open for accession for new member states. We're ready to communicate with other political arrangements and associations, and I hope that those integration processes will help foster broad partnership with Europe and Asian and Pacific region. Naturally, we cannot neglect Russia's accession to the WTO, which opened a new stage of integration to the global economic system for our country, a new quality of integration, and should contribute substantially to the comprehensive modernization of Russian economy and ensure its stable growth. The outcomes of December summit between Russia and European Union reaffirmed that there's no alternative to enforcing our strategic partnership. Modernization is of great importance here. I want to highlight as the most important achievement an arrangement of steps that need to be taken to move towards visa-free regime. An agreement was signed with Poland, which establishes visa-free cross-border travel for all citizens of Kaliningrad region and commensurable area of Poland, Voivodsk. Another important achievement is new string of Nord Stream. Among key areas of our foreign policy remain our relations with the United States of America. Last year saw entry into force of START Treaty, entry into force of agreement on cooperation in peaceful nuclear energy. We expanded our international agenda. The Bilateral Presidential Commission worked very actively. It encompasses 20 working groups already that cover all areas of cooperation one can imagine. Naturally, there are some questions on which positions of our countries diverge. For instance, missile defense. We hope that the US will hear and take into account our legitimate concerns, which we've voiced professionally and specifically. And we count that our partners will make a choice towards pulling efforts together and looking for joint responses to challenges of the modern world that we share. Same is true for our relations with NATO. We hope that we'll be able to reach the new level of partnership if we manage to create an architecture of equal and indivisible security in Euro-Atlantic region, taking into account all interests. Our draft proposal of the treaty on European security remains on the table. Growing instability in certain regions, first and foremost in the Middle East and the north of Africa, has highlighted the ultimate truth that the principle of the rule of law and strengthening democratic foundations must be respected not only within each and every state, but on the international arena. We are opposing any violence towards civilian population, but we also strongly oppose interference, military interference from the outside into domestic conflicts. We oppose treating mandates that are given by the UN Security Council lightly, mandates for tackling various crisis situations, and we believe that attempts to roll out Libyan scenario to other conflicts are totally unacceptable. We are specifically concerned today with the situation in Syria. We insist that solution must be political, and we support efforts by the mission of observers of the League of Arab States in Syria. We believe that any violence in Syria must be stopped, no matter of the origin, and an inclusive dialogue must be started. Russian draft resolution that was presented to the UN Security Council was targeted at exactly that purpose, and it is being endorsed by China and BRICS member states. Talking about BRICS, last year we managed to broaden our mutually beneficial, multifaceted and equal partnership within this format. Today, BRICS has become a global factor. Last year's summit of BRICS leaders reaffirmed that this is an authoritative arrangement which has influence both in finance, economics, and at the same time sets the tone in international affairs. And this approach is being endorsed by the growing number of states. We hope that the forthcoming BRICS summit in New Delhi will further enforce mutually beneficial cooperation between participants of the forum and will help to further consolidate their positions in global economy, global finance and international politics. We continue to enforce our positions in the Asia-Pacific region. Special attention was given to the development of strategic partnership relations with China and India, broadening multifaceted cooperation with Japan, Korea, ASEAN member states, and other countries of the Asia-Pacific region. We tried to establish technological investment alliances, took part in the work of multilateral regional arrangements. Since last year, Russia, together with the United States, started taking part in the East Asian Summit. And this new mechanism opens interesting and promising opportunities in terms of building in the region transparent, open and comprehensive as well as balanced architecture of security and cooperation. Naturally, enforcing and strengthening mutually beneficial ties between our country and partners in the region will help to successfully stage the forthcoming APEC summit in Vladivostok. Among our important partners on the global arena, I would like to highlight many countries from Latin America. We continued broadening our relations with them last year on the basis of mutually beneficial approach. Important resource of our work is using efficiently the soft power and all its instruments in foreign policy. We are determined to broaden our cooperation with civil society, expert community, business circles, media. We'll actively use the existing potential of the Russian Council on Foreign Affairs that was set up last year, foundation support public diplomacy named after Gorchakov, that complement the existing instruments of our cooperation with the civil society, and I hope that this year the Foundation to support and protect rights of our citizens abroad will become fully operational, and we want to see the Agency of International Cooperation working in the nearest future. We believe that in our society there's a broad consensus of support of the foreign policy that was formulated last year based on pragmatic approach, openness, predictability. Our foreign policy is oriented at ensuring national interests, and our actions internationally are balanced. We try to use to the full existing opportunities in order to contribute to foreign economic growth, resolving social problems, and increasing prosperity of our citizens. And I'm convinced that our foreign partners can count on continuity of our foreign policy in light of the forthcoming presidential elections in our country. Naturally, problems in the world remain numerous, and that means that this year we'll have to be active, innovative, creative, in searching ways that would allow to efficiently contribute to resolving those issues, doing everything possible to ensure favorable conditions for gradual development of our country. This concludes my opening remarks, and I will be ready to take your questions. I would like to start our Q&A session. A question from Russia 24 TV channel. Don't forget to use the mic.
Видите, как у нас? Это инновационная.
See, it's an innovative chair. Ponomaryova, Russia 24, after the events in the North of Africa and Middle East. Mostly Islamic parties come to power. How would you assess those changes? What impact would they have for the region and the world? Well, attention of many leading states is now focused on the region. I believe that changes in the region are far from being over. We're witnessing the early stage of the transformation, and one needs to understand that if we believe that people should have right to define their own future, forces from outside must accept choices made by people so that countries should not interfere in the dialogue of the election process. We've seen a long election campaign in Egypt, which lasted a few months, and as a result, leading parties in parliament are Islamic parties. Muslim Brotherhood set up one of them, which is a force, and some forces that are even more radical than the Muslim Brotherhood. The main conclusion is that we need to cooperate and work with all parties that comply with the Constitution, and this will ensure that those events make region more stable, help tackle social economic problems, which are the root cause of protests in the countries of the Middle East and the North of Africa. I want to highlight again, we cannot try and interfere in those processes, especially using armed force. We cannot try and fine-tune those processes to someone's interest of countries that have nothing to do with a region, and who should be formulating their policies and approaches in accordance with the position of these or that countries' decisions. Well, once again, we're just witnessing the early stage of the process. The most important principle, as like doctors say, we should do no harm. We should support national dialogue. We should explain those forces that are in opposition that they need to find agreement through political process and not tell those forces to take arms and throw over regimes, because if that happens, not only countries themselves would suffer, but countries that are located far away from them. Bloomberg News Agency. Good day, Sergey Viktorovich. I have two questions, if I may. Last year, Nikolai Patrushev said that Russia has information that Western countries and Turkey are preparing for a military intervention in Syria, including imposing no-fly zone. Could you dwell on that? Western countries, Great Britain, France, Turkey, NATO, say that this is not true. Second question. Susan Rice, U.S. ambassador to the UN, yesterday criticized Russia over the information that Russian vessel delivered ammunition to Syria. Could you comment on that too? As to the information that a military intervention against Syria might be planned, that a no-flight zone is being discussed, similar to the Libyan scenario. Well, we get all this news from you, journalists. When you report, you probably do that on the basis of some sources. Actually, we have other sources that reaffirm similar plans, at least at the discussion stage, on what to do should the situation in Syria remain as it is.
I've heard some counter-arguments, and I hope these counter-arguments were made sincerely and would reflect the real approach of the relevant states regarding the Syrian crisis, so that such assertions meet the positions taken by Russia. That's inadmissibility of the military interference. Having said that, as regards no-fly zone, our colleagues in the West indeed have been discussing the matter between themselves. I would think that within the NATO this subject would not be beyond the limits of discussion either. I've heard that no-fly zone regarding Syria probably is not regarded very worthwhile method of pursuing it, since as opposed to the Libyan situation, this time in Syria, aviation is not used against the civil populace. And then there are other ideas which are being translated into life, like dispatching so-called humanitarian convoys to Syria with the hope to provoke a reaction on the part of the government forces, border guards, and to try to see to it that an impression be made that there is a humanitarian catastrophe. We also know, nobody contradicts that arms are delivered to Syria, arms for the militants, extremists who are trying to use this protest movement to their end, to carry out the force toppling of the government, starting with some cities on the border of the Syrian Arab Republic. This is, again, inadmissible, absolutely counterproductive, since it will result in the booming of the spiral of violence. We come out against any violence in Syria, no matter where it comes from. This is a quotation from the plan of the League of Arab States to stop violence no matter where it comes from. And those who have an influence over those armed groupings in the ranks of oppositionists should use their influence in order to stop violence coming from other side. And those who are talking with the government of the Syrian Arab state indeed need to insist on seeing to it that the authorities would stop using force against civil citizens. Now, as regards the assertions of Susan Rice, with expressing concern over the fact that that's a Chariot, I guess, boat with Russian cargoes unloaded its cargo in the Syrian port. I even heard that she asked for some explanations there. We don't find it necessary to explain, to provide any justification on our part. We haven't been breaching any international agreements there, no Security Council resolutions. We've been trading with Syria with such goods which are not prohibited by international law. Naturally, the one-sided sanctions adopted and introduced by U.S., European Union, some other countries, cannot be regarded by us as legitimate with respect to the activities pursued by the Russian Federation. Basically speaking, lopsided activities and sanctions there are always torpedoing collective activities regarding Iran, Syria, and other places. If somebody wants to use the Security Council here, you need to address those matters in the security countries. Agree there whether you need sanctions or not. Agree there what kind of activities in addition to sanctions could be used with a view to helping to calm down this situation. But if somebody by him or herself, without consultation with their partners, would decide to use such coercive measures with some very serious measures and sanctions sometimes, and then they will address Security Council saying, well, we've decided it, now you need to support us. As minimum, you should fulfill the decisions we have adopted without your participation. But this is no way to go. Now, the Japanese colleague Unimori newspaper, please take the floor here. Good afternoon, Sergey Viktorovich. At the end of this month, you are planning to visit Japan. We would think that over 4 years, the President Medvedev, being in office, the political relations between our countries have worsened somewhat. In particular, the leadership of Russia has stated that the Kuril Islands, in particular, are part of the Russian Federation, and they regard it as a just outcome of World War II. Now, this question is closed, they say. Well, does it mean that Russia intends to cooperate with Japan only in economy, in the field of economy, but the territorial issues will not be tackled? Thank you. Well, I will not, on my part, characterize our relations of the past year as such as being worsened. We regard Japan as our important partner in Asia and the Pacific. Incidentally, we have built on very efficient coordination as regards preparation to the EPIC summit in Vladivostok. This has been supported in the course of the conversation which took place between the President of Russia and Prime Minister of Japan in Honolulu at the margins of the EPIC summit November last year. By all means, we are interested in the development of the trade and economy and investment cooperation with Japan, but I can assure you that we have no less interest on the part of our Japanese partners. Today, Japan makes part of the 10 top foreign economy partners of Russia. Of late, basically, we have restored the turnover, which was undermined by the crisis last year. The turnover has grown by 1/3 and basically has approached the maximum crisis statistics, around $30 billion. Which is not bad. And on our part, it's more impressive as regards potential, which has not been exhausted, but those results were gained despite all the difficulties faced by the economy of Japan with respect to the nature technogenic catastrophe which has taken place there. Lastly, we have also noted the investments of Japan to the Russian economy comprise around $10 billion US dollars. And we're being actively cooperating in fuel and energy sector. Not only that, and I'm sure that the new impetus of our partnership will be materialized through the cooperation in the peaceful atom cooperation on the basis of the agreement which was ratified by the Russian Parliament last year, and correspondingly we has entered into force here. And basically, talking about the prospects, we and Japan have been complementary economically as regards our potentials, first, which is a good prerequisite for the possibilities to tap on next. We've been sincerely responding to the calamity which your country faced. We've been actively supporting in overcoming the repercussions of that catastrophe by providing energy sources and dispatching some of the search and rescue officials. We have received kids here for recreation, and we have been actively supporting elimination of the consequence of this casualty, which improves our atmospherics, not worsening it. Incidentally, we have noted the readiness to render a helping hand at difficult times is reciprocal, and we have valued very much when last year when our fishery boat Sparta was having casualty at the Antarctic, and the Japanese side immediately suggested they would send the icebreaker, and we are grateful for that. Certainly, we've been rightfully pointing out that in our dialogue, there still is the problem of the peace treaty on the table. We're talking about the overdue problem. We'll confirm again, I'll confirm again, that what you have just quoted, those islands which you referred to, is making part of our country on an absolutely justful basis on the outcomes of World War II, which has been enshrined in the Charter of the UN, and our sovereignty of those islands has not to be discussed, no doubts about that, and we understand the importance of mutually acceptable virtual solution to the peaceful treaty issue, including this aspect of the peaceful treaty as a border delimitation. And we're convinced that the quest for such a solution should not be done in a hurry, in a haste, or agitation has no place there. And the Japanese side should forego lopsided provocational attempts there. We've just mentioned the fact that these problems are to be discussed in the frameworks of quiet, unbiased dialogue, including along the lines of the historians of the two countries to be involved there, which has already taken place in our dialogue, and naturally in maximum favorable conditions to provide productiveness in concluding this peaceful treaty will be set forth in the result of the broad, without any artificial restrictions, whole set of relations in economy, humanitarian sphere, and international affairs too. We want to be partners with Japan. We want to work out a common approach towards regional international problems, as it were, first and foremost as regards military political stability and building on the cooperation between our two countries. And one more thing, to set up a good atmospherics there, it would be worthwhile to pursue joint economy in the southern Kuril Islands, and to do that there is goodwill on our side. Russia, of course, relies on herself first. We do have the relevant federal programs in place, a federal program. But we know that the business community of Japan and of some other countries for that matter are interested in seeing to it that they will implement jointly with us those projects of cooperation there. We do have some promising areas like processing of fisheries, geothermic infrastructure, tourism, and many other things to mention here. And there are all opportunities of such cooperation to be developed further on the basis of Russian legislation too. All of these issues on my part will be thoroughly discussed with Mr. Kemba, my counterpart, during the visit to Tokyo, which will start in 10 days, I guess. Please, Russia Today TV channel. Good afternoon, Sergey Viktorovich. Grachev, Russian TV. Of late, we have seen tension around Iran. There is an opinion that recent events in Libya, which have been evolving in Syria, are also part of a bigger plan, the ultimate goal of which being to destabilize Iran. What Tehran should do, so to say, to cope with this mighty pressure from outside, or the ultimate purpose basically would be not to put an end to the nuclear program of Iran, but rather to topple the ruling regime in this country. Well, you know, this is quite a serious matter, especially bearing in mind you've posed it in the context of a broader regional perspective of development. And on our part, on several occasions, we had a chance to talk about the fact that we are concerned, so to say, with the fact that beyond these problems of some countries, we shouldn't lose sight of the general situation happening in this very important geopolitical area. And both in the Syrian situation and in Iraq, where the situation has aggravated substantially in the wake of the American withdrawal, Yemen, other countries, and remembering the fact that such aggravation of relations of some Arab countries and Iran occurring, active position taken by Turkey regarding these processes. Sometimes you get a hint, and that's very concerning. That's the deepening of difficulties between Shia and Sunnites in the Islamic community. And if this trend is not curbed, it can entail very major conflict to occur precisely internally in the Islamic world. Naturally, like with any other civilizations, there is a struggle for influence taking place there. Iran, as an ancient country with their own traditions and culture and history, would like to play a more active role. Turkey, too, is also claiming a possibility to play an important role in the Islamic world. But also, Arabic countries would like to see to it that their civilization would not lose her positions. Traditionally, Egypt played a leading role in the Arab world today. For understandable reasons, Egyptians are more focused on their internal problems. Therefore, this movement is quite serious. It encompasses many regions. I wouldn't like at all to think that the occurring threats and positions taken regarding Iran, put forward against Iran, are part of this process. No. Fact of the matter is, the external forces should not try to split the Islamic world. On the contrary, they should work with a view to making the Islamic world a reliable, stable partner of all of us. Truth of the matter is, to address any international problem without Islamic world, to counter those threats and to meet the challenges to all us is not a possibility today. To be more specific concerning Iran, on several occasions we've mentioned the fact that we are not supporting sanctions. Even sometimes sanctions could be inevitable, and this is exactly what happened when the 18 months ago most recent sanctions on Iran was taken in Security Council, and with the adoption of that sanction, all other conceivable sanctions which could affect the conduct of Iran in a nuclear field regarding their cooperation with IAEA were exhausted. Therefore, now that lopsided, unilateral Western additions are made by Western countries and other countries as one-sided sanctions versus Iran has nothing in common with this drive to ensure inalienability of the NPT regime. This is serious. This is aimed at, putting a loop and to stifle the economy of Iran and the situation of Iranian populace, and probably to instigate their dissent. We're positive. There are all chances to resume talks between the Sikhs and Iran there. And we are very concerned. We're very concerned that these processes sometimes are hindered. Just to give you a most recent example or examples, in August, the delegation of experts of IAEA headed by the Deputy Director General visited Iran, and for the first time they were admitted to the facilities where before they were not allowed to go. By all means, it's a positive signal on the part of Iran. It's a step in direction of all those appeals which were addressed by us to Tehran, so that in addition to the mandatory for all agreements guarantee safeguards of IAEA, Iran would also, to begin with, de facto and then probably de jure, commence to use the provisions of the additional protocol concerning Iran and the provision of so-called modified Code 3.1. And once again, in August, there was a noticeable gesture made that Iran would be ready to go in that direction on their part. In November, suddenly, we had a report of the Director General of IAEA, which presented some facts which have been known for over 7 or 8 years. But for some reason, he decided this time to qualify those facts as a qualitatively new situation regarding the Iranian nuclear programs, as a confirmation of the fact that allegedly Iran do have in their nuclear programs some military aspects. Once again, there were no justification for such a conclusion. Still, it was made, and all this situation has caused unnecessary agitation on the part of mass media. That's a very comprehensive and difficult technical matter, and when it's finding light in electronic mass media and newspapers, you cannot explain everything there. Therefore, the reader at its leisure will find it to be somewhat new, which is not new at all. Together with our Chinese partners, we had to be very active on this matter at the governing board in IAEA in October last year, and the result of that, and we are thankful to our Western partners for that, we have come to a consensus and resolution which does not dramatize the situation.
On the contrary, we got back to square one, to the context of the need for negotiations between Iran and the IAEA, having noted that both Iran and the agency should recognize their responsibility for engaging in such negotiations. Now, on the basis of the resolution, a visit of IAEA experts is being prepared to Iran that will be headed by the Deputy Director General of the organization. Iranians have agreed to tackle specifically all matters that give ground to any concerns about the existence of potential military nuclear program. Once again, just like in autumn, we are seeing so-called spoilers. It seems as though the EU decision on new serious sanctions was timed to coincide with the visit. Sanctions include ban for sales of Iranian oil and substantial limitation of operations with the Iranian Central Bank. I'm not saying that that was done on purpose, but we're seeing a striking coincidence. Once again, in autumn, Iran made a step in a positive direction. Immediately we're seeing an IAEA report which builds tensions in an unjustified fashion. Now again, Iranians are ready to host a delegation, ready to start serious discussion, while European Union passes new sanctions, thus deteriorating the environment for those negotiations, and it is unlikely that they will be productive, not to mention threats to use force against Iran, which unfortunately are still being heard, so will continue insisting that be 5+1 or 3+3, it is sometimes referred to, UN Security Council permanent states plus Germany and some others should continue their work now. We're getting information that Iranians are also ready for dialogue. We are in permanent touch. Shortly we'll be hosting in Moscow deputy head of the Security Council of this country. We also continued discussions with European Union leadership, as well as the authorities of Iran, trying to agree on the date of the next meeting. I believe that now we all need to focus on those practical steps, not on sanctions, and especially not on threats to use force. Over to you. Sergey Viktorovich, Alexei Vashchenko. Zavstra newspaper and Нужная newspaper from Abkhazia. You mentioned the rule of law, which is important both domestically and internationally. The International Court has been reviewing the case of Vladislav Šešelj, head of the Serbian Radical Party. He's been in prison for the 9 years. Charges have not been proven. The court refuses to pay for trips of witnesses. He's having health problems. Nonetheless, he remains in custody. So my question is what Russia is doing and what could be Russia's response. My second question, 3.5 years ago, August war took place. The heads of our state, Mr. Medvedev, Mr. Putin, Prosecutor General Chaika, Mr. Bashikin, said that Saakashvili committed an act of genocide and mass murder and promised that the Russian court will be on this case, that relevant documents will be given to the International Court of Justice. Now that that has been done. So my question is, when finally will be the case initiated against Saakashvili? And whether WTO's accession was the reason for slowing down on the case. As regards the International Tribunal of former Yugoslavia, we've been long in favor of closing down this tribunal because it has did all its work and it was not perfect. I mean, its work, we are all aware of the fact that former President of Yugoslavia Milosevic passed away in custody, although his lawyers asked judges to provide needed medical assistance. We're also aware of the facts you just mentioned, that many accused, mostly, if not only Serbs, are being treated in an inexplicably tough way, unjustified tough way, and investigation takes eternity. Although those accused that represent Bosnia, they're treated differently. They're found not guilty, oftentimes, and we believe that oftentimes the tribunal is politically biased in its rulings, although even Carla Del Ponte, when she stepped down as prosecutor of the tribunal and became free in her judgments, she spoke about a number of facts. And as a result of her statements, Dick Marty, European Parliament deputy from Switzerland, initiated an investigation of the so-called Medicus case, and will make sure it is seen through to the end. We, of course, note the attention of the UN Security Council when it reviews report of work of the Tribunal of former Yugoslavia on the situation of accused, including the situation of Šešelj. From our contacts with our Serbian partners, we are aware that he is not complaining about his situation. As you know, he is ready to continue protecting himself, and if needed, we will be ready to render assistance we have in accordance with legal assessment arrangements we have with Serbia. As regards Saakashvili, it would be wrong to say that we are neglecting this matter. We are actively supporting claims that were filed by citizens of South Ossetia and Russian citizens, filed to the European Court of Human Rights. But this is a lengthy process. It does not mean that it has been suspended. And of course, there's no link whatsoever with the WTO, no correlation, because we cannot compare our accession to the WTO, important as that might be, with terrible crimes that were committed by Saakashvili that can never be forgiven. Interfax News Agency. Timur Hursandov, Interfax News Agency. One more question about WTO. This year, Russia is expected to finally accede to the organization. But Jackson-Vanik amendment still remains in place in the US. When can we count on seeing this amendment lifted? And if it is not, would that mean that Russia would not comply with part of its commitments under the WTO in its relations with the US? Well, of course, that might happen, because unilateral restrictions imposed on one of the WTO member states will not pass unnoticed. No one will be turning a blind eye to that. Time has long come to lift the amendment since 1974, when it was passed with one and only aim to punish the Soviet Union for its policy on restricting entrance and exit of its citizens. And that meant, first and foremost, the freedom of Jewish immigration. This issue has been long tackled over 20 years ago. No restrictions are in place any longer. All of those that wanted to leave left long ago. Many came back already, while Jackson-Vanik remains in place. By the way, the US themselves, de facto and de jure, recognized in 1994 that in Russia the freedom of movement is guaranteed, and since 2002 Russia was recognized by the US as a market economy. So of course it makes no sense that this amendment is still in place, and it deprives Russia of the status of a normal trading partner with the US. In practice, it does not harm, because every year US President tables to the Congress a notification that by his executive order he suspends an amendment. He has such right in accordance with legislation, and he uses it every year. But legally it remains in place. We believe that it's an internal issue for the US to tackle. Over the past years in the Senate, many reasons have been given to keep it, linking its existence no longer with the Jewish immigration, which is no longer an issue, but with our position on poultry or other minor issues, which for a big country would not be appropriate to use as a pretext to keep this amendment. I believe now our Washington partners have understand that this collision might hard hit the interest of the US business circles. According to our data, Obama administration are planning to start moving through Congress of the legislative initiative. We are aware that the US business circles are setting up a lobbyist structure to support this initiative to lift Jackson-Vanik, but so far this relic of Cold War remains, and that means that in accordance with US law in December, the ministerial conference in Geneva, they had to make a statement that WTO trade agreements will not be used in relations with Russia. Similar statement was made by the Russian Federation. So when the ratification of our accession accession documents to WTO is over, provided checks and Vanik remains in place, then all our WTO agreements will not be used in our bilateral trade with the US. Thank you. Question 2 from the Chinese colleagues. Good day, Sergey Viktorovich. Central TV, China in the year 2012. Russia presidential elections will be taking place, while in China the 18th convent of the Communist Party will be electing the new leader. What do you think will the general trends be in the Russia-Chinese relations in the forthcoming year, and what role could journalists play in developing bilateral relations? My second question is, it's common knowledge that the West is building sanctions pressure against Syria. Could China and Russia, through joint efforts, break and reverse this trend and prevent the repetition of the Libyan scenario? Russian authorities have stressed on many occasions that the current level of Russia-Chinese cooperation is the highest in the history of our bilateral relations. Mutual respect, trust, taking into account of key interests of each other, have become integral components of our bilateral dialogue. Our global partnership on international affairs is a natural thing. It is not driven by immediate interest. It is oriented at the long run. Our positions are traditionally close. We support each other, striving for territorial integrity. Both Russia and China define as priorities of foreign policy, creating favorable climate for domestic development. China and Russia together advocate compliance with international law, UN Charter, including provisions that have to do with the non-use of force and not threaten to use force in international affairs, and the need to find peaceful solution to any disputes. And we, just like China, are interested in seeing increase in our bilateral trade, growing investment cooperation for the purposes of modernization. We do not think that geopolitically we are competitors. We are not competing for the spheres of influence, not in our immediate proximity, nor in 1,000 kilometers away from our borders. I believe that Russian society has come up with a consensus towards our policy with China, and I'm also aware that the Chinese population is supporting further broadening of interaction with Russia, and we believe that we have good prospects for our cooperation, irrespective of who would be in the head of both countries, and I'm sure that those trends of our strategic partnership are not determined by immediate interests. You mentioned the role of the media. We want to see media covering in as great detail as possible all aspects of our cooperation. We have very good plans for the short run, supplying Russian gas through pipelines, second stage of the nuclear power plant in China. Let us not forget that this year is the year of Russian tourism in China. So we would, of course, wish to see you cover this event as broadly as possible, and we hope that it will interest our general public and the tourist operators from China. As regards Syria, I mentioned that issue already. There's a draft resolution on the table, which in our view is just. It was tabled to the UN Security Council. September last year, it was Russia and China that co-sponsored this draft resolution, but now, after a few months, in light of recent developments, we introduced some amendments. It was endorsed by Russia, China, and some other BRICS member states. The priorities would be putting an end to violence, no matter the origin of the violence. Secondly, we need to make sure that all parties of the conflict must be pressured to put an end to the conflict, both authorities and the armed opposition. Third, we must make sure that peaceful demonstration must be treated separately from extremists, those that try to use peaceful protests to instigate false opposition. Fourthly, the draft resolution is trying to make sure that the mission of observers of the League of Arab States has full support and that all parties of the conflict and opposition groups cooperate with them in full. And fifth, the draft resolution suggests calls for immediate national dialogue with all Syrian players. A matter of principle in that draft resolution is that it clearly states that all UN Security Council fully complies with the UN Charter principles of non-interference in domestic affairs, non-use of force, or not threatening to use force, and are in favor of finding peaceful solution to the Syrian crisis. Another matter of principle, which stems from the Syrian experience you mentioned, it clearly states our draft resolution that nothing in this resolution can be interpreted as a permission to use force against Syria by any actor or party. And those two latest points are unacceptable for our Western partners. So when you hear them say that our draft is not tough enough towards the regime, they refuse to answer the main question. Why steps that have been taken by the armed opposition against administrative buildings, public buildings, hospitals, schools, terrorist acts that are being committed, why should those be neglected? They refuse to comment on that, and they also insist that we lift from the resolution the part which states that nothing in this resolution can be interpreted as permission to use force. I do not want to quote any Russian proverbs, but once again we'll continue insisting, and we and Chinese colleagues agree that it is a matter of principle that those points should remain in any resolution that might be passed by the UN Security Council. Another red line which is very clear for us: we're not endorsing any sanctions, because unilaterally imposed sanctions were imposed without any consultation with Russia or China, and now our partners want us to approve UN Security Council, through the UN Security Council, sanctions that we did not agree upon, did not approve. So that would be my answer. If someone is trying to use force at any cost, I already heard calls to impose Arab troops in Syria, then, well, we will hardly be able to oppose it.
If somebody wants that to be done very much on their part, but let it happen on their own initiative, let it be their responsibility. They will not be blessed and given power to do that by the Security Council inter-TASS agency. Please. Sergey Viktorovich, what do you think with regard to the upcoming elections in our country? What will happen to our foreign policies then? And next thing, if I may, what's your view of the future of the Russia-Belarusian relations, and is this union state viable at the current juncture? Now, first, as regards the future of foreign policies after elections, I've briefly mentioned that in my introductory word. I will add to that the foreign policies, in accordance with our constitution, is carried out by the president. It's based on the solid ground, clear of any logical interests. Hammering out the principles has become the outcome of the lengthy process of reflecting on the current juncture of politics in the world and the stance of Russia in the world today. And we have formulated those principles and the pathways to implement them in such a manner so that we could ensure the consistency and predictability of our foreign policy activities. We are aware of the fact that our citizens would like to see their country independent, strong, confident, coming out for fairness in the international arena, for the further bolstering of the legal grounds, and I'm sure such policies will be supported by our citizens in the wake of the elections, and I'm positive that the fundamentals, pragmatism, multi-vectoral approach, transparency based on non-confrontal support of our national interests will find their place and will be pursued because they are a demand, not on our part only. We get a sense of that being productive. In basic meaning, they are universal principles in international relations, and they are perceived virtually in practical deeds and international arena by all countries. And I'm convinced that further on, too, we'll utilize what we have accomplished to set out maximum favorable conditions for modernization in our country, so that the citizens would get a sense of practical results, whether it be the increase of number of visa-free countries for our citizens, protection of our citizens who find themselves in difficult circumstances abroad, up to setting out equal, non-discriminatory terms for our businesses abroad. I'm not talking about big business, but also small and medium businesses. There are many people willing to have trade with the European Union, to start some small bakeries, other enterprises there. Now it's not allowed to do, but after the entry to WTO, I think that SMEs will also get a sense that their good-natured expansion abroad will be perceived more favorably. Perhaps I will stop here. Now, the second question was regarding, the union state between Russia and Belarus. You know, certainly this project is still valid. No doubts about that. Many questions being asked concerning the fact that they have already shaped up the common economic space. European Economic Union is there. Will that devour the union state of Russia and Belarus? They wonder. I will now try to predict things. At this stage, I might as well say that the union state includes a series of agreements, which so far I should stress, within this troika paradigm of this economic space have not been reflected, and they go beyond the agreements already reached there. In particular, I will point out the fact that ensuring equal rights for citizens of Belarus in Russia and ensuring equal rights of Russian citizens in Belarus, addressing such matters is already made. There are some dumps down the road. We'll probably go over them and that regards civilian and other aspects involved. I don't perceive any reasons. On the contrary, I would think that this union state will further be developed, among other things, including the fact that, we certainly now have Mr. Kristenko, who is at the helm of this union state and who will take a fresh look at what needs to be done in addition for the well-being of our countries there. Let alone the fact that the military aspect of the union state, defensive aspect, is also there. I predict that it will be developed, bearing in mind the integrational processes where Russia and Belarus are involved elsewhere. Our Azerbaijani colleagues have a question here, please. Please, could you make your question more concise, if possible? And questions and answers, too, more concise, right? I'm Anagaev, Azerbaijan Information Agency, Salamir. Sergey Viktorovich, my congratulations on the holidays. I have many questions. I will ask just one question here. What was the 2011 year like regarding Russia-Azerbaijani relations? We're especially concerned with this thing. Is Russia intending to further invigorate the cooperation on the Nagorno-Karabakh settlement? And we'd like to clarify the date of the upcoming meeting of our presidents, if possible. My second question concerning the advancements on the Caspian state. What's the current status of these discussions? And very briefly, third question, that's the Gabonese radar. What's the current status of talks and what should be the agreement there? Thank you. Cameraman, I respect them very much. To you, I could probably provide you better for opportunities with me probably fidgeting here and there. Now, our relations with Azerbaijan are strategic and very important ones. We assess highly the potential already reached there in existence for further development. Our presidents have been regularly meeting. We've been regularly in touch with my colleague Elmar Mingyarov. Literally tomorrow, he will be visiting with us here in Moscow. We'll sign a very important document, an agreement on the issues pertaining to diplomatic immovables. We have computed, measured everything included, and this is how we'll close the overdue question, and we'll be discussing the next trilateral meeting of the presidents on the bilateral settlement. On the 23rd of January, this meeting will take place in Sochi. And basically, holding this meeting will answer your question whether Russia intends to pursue its intermediary efforts on Nagorno-Karabakh settlement. Of course, we do plan to do that. We've been doing it in the frameworks of our participation in the troika of the co-chairs of the Minsk OSCE group. Co-chairs will also be there in Sochi, and if necessary, the presidents might as well communicate with them. Now, as to the Globalin radar, virtually these days I don't remember what dates are involved. These talks will be continued between our military delegations. I understand the question is about the concrete parameters of the lease rates. No basic problems there. And simply they need to agree on these things. As regards the status of Caspian, I'll have to express my dissatisfaction after the Baku summit. Unfortunately, not very vigorously, those agreed decisions by presidents have been pursued. Two basic agreements were reached there. That's to announce moratorium of sturgeon experts, and they gave 2 months for preparation for such agreements to be implemented. Up till now, they have failed to do so. It's not the fault of Azerbaijan, of Russia, I might as well say here. The second agreement concerned the basic agreement to establish the lateral areas, to define the lateral areas of Caspian, which would include the area under sovereignty of the lateral state and the area of exclusive fishery rights. And here we've been continuing our discussions. Working parties have been working together, have been discussing these matters. They have agreed already on the width of two such areas. Apparently that satisfies one and all. But it's also important to move ahead on other issues, including the issue of the right of peaceful passage, intending that the military ships of all lateral states in the Caspian area could, on notification, peacefully pass those areas. The question is being tackled. I don't exactly remember. At the end of the year, I guess the regular meeting of the Working Party took place, where on the series of aspects of the legal status of Caspian they have achieved progress. And I'm quite optimistic on the furtherance of this effort. We are interested in it being promptly productive. On top of that, there is an agreement of the next Caspian summit to be staged in Moscow. Once the negotiator will have agreed, we'll plan the dates for such a meeting. Russia TV channel. Russia? Rusian. That's Arabic language, Russian TV channel. Now, revisiting again, that's Arabic Spring Revolution. Have they affected the global world processes and the vital interests of Russia? From your perspective, as of today, do you think there are certain forces in the world which would like to establish their new influence over those states, trying to export democracy over there. What's your insight? What needs to be done to restore stability in the region? And what role might be played by Russia there? Thank you. Well, for the stability in the region, it's important not to put fuel to the fire. There's a lot of fire in place already out there. Not to impede the efforts to establish and improve national political dialogue internally in all those countries where you have that turbulence. Not to instigate groups involved in the conflict so that they would be impregnable in their positions and not to take to arms. And Russia might as well help with the fact that it supports firmly those principles of international law of not interference in domestic affairs. The Arab Islamic world, there are our long-term partners. Russia, too, is a multi-confessional country. Islam is the second largest religion in our country. And to us, we cannot stand aloof to what's going on in the countries with whom for decades we've been developing close, friendly relations. They're second. From our own experience, we know how important it is to develop the interconfessional peace and concert. And we are prepared on these positions of upholding those principles to take specific steps to calm down the situation there. As of late, regularly for several months, we have not just on a day-to-day basis been working with the Syrian leadership, but also we've been regularly in touch with the Syrian opposition. We've been actively promoting all the participants in the Syrian drama to see to it that they would promptly hold a meeting where they could agree on the launch of the international dialogue. We've heard that the League of Arab States proposes to start such dialogue in Cairo. If and when there are any difficulties to occur with regards to this venue, we are prepared on our territory to receive all the Syrian parties involved without any interference in their discussion, to set out proper conditions for them to start talking between themselves. One more thing we might do, and we'll do that, just as I've said, we'll oppose. We will not allow that to happen so that the Security Council should bless any illegal decisions which would not meet the interests of the countries of the region. Please. First channel, Sergey Viktorovich, what's the probability that this year the war in Iran will start? Could you provide us a rating for such an opportunity? Where is the guarantee that the nuclear program of Iran is solely peaceful? Second question, concerning protection of our citizens abroad. The consular service has been criticized after the Concordia liner, the Sadovnichi liner pilot case where he stayed for several months in Tajikistan, and in case of Zadiro mother, 5 months in custody again. So what needs to be done by the Russian diplomats to protect the citizens of Russia abroad? Well, regarding the facts you've just posed, I have different facts. I had a chance to express myself earlier. Maybe you have not noticed the fact I put forward. Regarding Sadovnichi first, I don't exactly remember the date when he and his Estonian colleague were informed that they could not fly out, or that they are not allowed from Tajikistan. Nobody informed diplomats or consular officers, neither Sadovnichi or his colleague or the owner of that airline. We've learned about that only in May. And the next day, literally, our ambassador wrote an official request to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the Service of National Security, Committee of the National Security of Tajikistan, Alata. And since then, at all litigations, our consular officer was present, and this subject was put up to the top level on several occasions. We did not make too much fuss about that. Well, but sometimes those people who are dealing with a specific problem, they are oriented towards getting results rather than get popular blessing. Regarding Idrisova, the situation is much simpler there. The fact is she released eventually without any court litigation. That was a merit of our consular service and embassy there, who dealt directly with the leadership there. Once they got information of her detention, this was the situation under control. This lady herself tells this story. I've seen it on TV myself. Unfortunately, signed a paper there in Arabic language, which was forwarded to her without any insistence on prior to signing that paper. She had to meet our consular officer, but in that paper she signed her sincere admission of facts. Even having such a signature in United Arab Emirates as the queen of proof, it has been possible for us to resolve this big problem. Now, as regards to Costa Concordia casualty, probably have a distorted information. A couple of days ago, at the second channel, competing with you on Russian TV, I guess, there was a big program with participation of all those people who were on that boat. The ambassador spoke directly on the TV. It was not exactly how some people would like to portray it. I've heard one of our tourists who traveled to St. Petersburg, and in airport he said that diplomats gave him no money, no tickets was purchased for him by our diplomats, and allegedly he was given some paper to replace passport. Well, that's a notification of return without which you cannot travel, because all passports have drowned, I understand. Funds for the purchase of a ticket, we cannot provide those, since ambassadors don't have such funds in the first place still. Since the embassy learned about what happened, about that casualty, and that's approximately 200 kilometers off Rome, our representative traveled there. Immediately he linked with the emergency group of Italian government, and our consulates in Kenya and Marseille were involved immediately. We established contact here in Moscow with the Minister of Emergencies. A direct link was made to the embassy of Russia in Rome and Rostorism. And fact is, 108 tourists and 3 Russians are members of the crew there. They were documented by different tourist companies. Some of them were individual tourists too, so they found themselves in different hotels. Still, immediately contact was established with them.
And by the way, we were the first to get information about the fact that our citizens were on the vessel, that there were no casualties. Since January 14, our embassy started round-the-clock duty, and Channel 5 from St. Petersburg once dialed the number of the hotline that was given, 5 a.m. that was, and then a duty officer answered all the questions the correspondent had. By the way, I also heard that we were reproached that Japanese, for instance, used helicopters to transport their citizens. So we asked the Italian Civilian Population Service whether that was true. They said that it was not. It's just that passengers that were evacuated from the cruise vessel that was drowning, they were evacuated with helicopters, not because they were Japanese, but just because helicopters was the only means of rescue that could be employed in the situation. So I could not agree with all the negative assessments of work of our embassy. On the contrary, we think that they worked very well and were getting gratitude from Russian citizens that were rescued. Many people actually decided to stay until the 21st in Rome because they wanted to enjoy the Italian capital. We had a duty doctor who was in hotel at all times, a psychiatric export was also there. We also purchased clothes, food, fruit, or baby formula for those that need it before they were given any money from the tourist agents. So I want to ask colleagues to check before you make such statements, because in this case, my colleagues were beyond reproach. Of course, it is not always the case, but in this case, it is.
Пожалуйста.
Hispánica Gazeta El País.
El País, Spanish newspaper. Recently, Transnistrian elections took place. New president was elected, which marks a new stage or an attempt to start a new stage the relations in that respect. Does Russia have any new approaches? Or is it ready to be more creative in finding solutions to the conflict prior to the Dublin meeting, and should any economic assistance be rendered in the future should the conflict continue? Russia has relations with Transnistria. It's an important component of our relations with Moldova. We have economic ties with the region. We believe that arrangements that were reached by Tiraspol and Kishinev on unobstructed foreign economic activity of Transnistrian companies should be honored. At the moment, financially speaking, Transnistrian situation is difficult. We used to render them assistance in the past. We're prepared to consider any request on further humanitarian assistance, and we care, just because many Transnistrians are Russian citizens. And then they, of course, enjoy all social rights Russian citizens have. As regards the settlement, well, no new solution is needed. Back in 1993, we had good opportunity to finalize the matter, but then a document that was initialed by the parties the night before the signing ceremony and it was insisted by some European colleagues, was put aside from discussion. So this long-awaited document was not signed. Had it been signed 8 years ago, I'm sure that we would have long forgotten about Transnistrian conflict now. I don't know what were the reasons behind that step. Probably someone in Europe wanted the laurels of a peacekeeper to themselves. But let it be on the conscience of those that committed it. We are not gonna sit idle, but we need to take a number of important steps. First and foremost, we need to recognize that during negotiations, parties are equal. And I stress, it's a general global practice. Kishinev and Tiraspol are equal participants of negotiations. Secondly, we need to give up any extreme positions, because in the year 2005 in Moldova, a law was passed on certain aspects of the status of certain settlements on the left bank of Nistria, which basically states that there is no Transnistrian issue, that Transnistrian should agree that they live in a unitary state. This approach is not realistic. Transnistrian response to this approach is in saying that they already made their own decision and that they're independent. So as long as Kishinev insists that the law of 2005 is the only framework for settlement, Transnistrians will continue advocating another extreme. We formulated our proposals that have been broadly supported by our EU colleagues, and I hope that they will also be endorsed by the parties. We need to give up extreme positions and agree on the broadest possible autonomy for Transnistria, for special status of the region within the united, sovereign, neutral Republic of Moldova that should preserve its territorial integrity. What it takes is political will of those that can influence both parties. We're in touch with both parties. We frankly and openly give our position and explain how we see conditions for settlement. Some other outer participants of the process from the outside try to back one of the parties and pressure the other. But this will not have any positive effect, and I don't think it's moral to use for political purposes the incident that took place on January 1st on the checkpoint, when, contrary to all the agreed rules that were agreed by Tiraspol, Kishinev and Russian peacekeepers, so contrary to all those rules, young people rushed through checkpoint on their car without stopping. After that, a peacekeeper, in accordance with rules that have been approved by all parties, had to shoot in the air. Unfortunately, it so happened that the bullet hit a young person who had to be taken to hospital, and he passed away eventually. But trying to make this episode look, it's really hysterical way, tried to make it look as justification for dismantling the peacekeeping operation, in my view, that's blasphemy. Try make policy out of tragedy. And since we're talking about that, I want to mention, since there's been many speculations, we are investigating this case. Through our peacekeepers and relevant bodies. Unfortunately, Moldova partners refused to cooperate, and they refused to provide the vehicle for inspection so that we could understand the trajectory of the bullet, etc. Instead of doing so, they tried to make this matter political, but I hope that emotions will die out and all parties will understand that it's not about self-promotion, but about tackling an important issue. We need to find solution to, in the interest of the people that live on the both banks of the Dnistria, the voice of Russia. Olga Denisova, voice of Russia. Mr. Lavrov, recently, Russia has been actively establishing relations with the Asian countries. Last year, almost immediately after the APEC summit, Russia for the first time took part in the East Asian summit. And it's no secret that the development of Siberia and Far East largely depends on our contact with the Asian Pacific region. What is going to be the foundation for the contacts between Russia and the Asia-Pacific region in the future? Well, historically, we are linked with the Asia-Pacific region. We are part of this region. We've had and will always have our unalienable interests in the region. Quite another thing is that our cooperation with the countries of the region, which used to be high on our agenda in the past, was stepped up dramatically over the past years. There are a number of reasons for that. One of them is obviously the growing influence of the Asia-Pacific region in global affairs. The center of development of global economy is shifting towards that region. The second reason is our desire to use to the full the potential of our neighboring countries from that region to develop Siberia and the Far East. We have a relevant federal program, but just like in all other matters, when dealing with domestic affairs, we are ready to cooperate as broadly as needed with foreign partners, and Russian president defined our policy in the Asia-Pacific region that is aimed at promotion of cooperation and close engagement of Siberia, Far East and other regions to the Asia-Pacific integration, which opens new opportunities to move our economy to the innovative path, because this region has great potential in terms of improving socio-economic situation in the neighboring and adjacent regions and in boosting the role of our country in the regional architecture. So the APEC summit and forum that will be held this year offers great opportunity to use both the preparation and the staging of the forum to advance our policy. Apart from APEC, by the way, in APEC we are in favor of continuity and will continue working on traditional agenda items as liberalization of trade, investment, regional integration, but will complement the agenda with our own priorities, which have already been endorsed by APEC member states. Food security is first, shaping reliable logistic and transportation chains, and cooperation for innovative growth. Apart from APEC, over the past years we've fostered ties with ASEAN. Next summit, Russia-ASEAN, took place. We cooperate very closely with the structures that cooperate with ASEAN. As ASEAN partner, we take part in the Regional Security Forum, where, together with the 10 Southeast Asia member states, all partners are involved, over 20 member states, all in all. Since last year, we also started taking part in the Defense Ministers' meeting of ASEAN and partner states, which is also a very important mechanism that allows to build confidence in the military sphere, which is always a good thing. And since last year, like I mentioned, we joined the East Asian Summit's mechanism. It's a unique structure, a unique interstate union, apart from APEC, which is mostly focused on economic matters, while East Asian Summit is the only highest-level mechanism which gets together once a year to discuss not only economy but also security issues. November last year, 6th East Asian Summit took place. For the first time, Russia and US took part in that event, and I'm sure that it's a very promising forum to discuss security in Asia, especially against the backdrop of the initiative that was tabled by the year 2010 by President Medvedev and Chinese Chairman Hu Jintao, saying that all Asia-Pacific member states should reaffirm their commitment to the principle of equal, indivisible security, peaceful settlement of all disputes, non-use of force, and other underlying principles of international law, to make sure that security ensured through pooling efforts and not on the basis of block arrangements, because those block arrangements always leaves someone behind, and security level is not equal in different areas. So I hope that this mechanism will be considering those matters actively. Apart from that, last year we became full-fledged participant of the so-called ASAM Forum, Asia-Europe Forum, which was set up to enforce cooperation between Asia and Europe. What's particular about it, lots of attention is given to inter-civilization dialogue. This fall, next ASAM Summit will be taking place in Laos, and we are preparing for that now. I would like to also note that in Asia-Pacific region, there are other structures in place, in particular those that are established by members of parliament. Just recently, Valentina Ivanovna Matvienko took part in the next session of Parliamentary Forum in Tokyo, and decision was taken that Russia will be next chairman, so in the year 2013, the parliamentary summit will be held in Vladivostok. It once again reaffirms that Russia is one of the key players of the Asia-Pacific region. This is what we feel, this is what we're being told. We are treated as a serious partner and an important factor of stability in the region. Naturally, our policy will be pursued in the future. And of course, the fact that we participate in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, is also an important contribution to the regional agenda. There are many formats, and maybe in the future we'll try to align them in some ways. But now I listed the existing mechanisms. It took me about half an hour, I believe. So we are participants of all of those mechanisms. And it's a good thing, because the more we communicate, the better for the country, the better for the people. Latvia, Čas newspaper. Recently, in Latvia, many people have been concerned about the status of the Russian language, and now unthinkable has happened. A referendum is taking place to declare it a national language. There's also an initiative to hold a similar referendum in the European Union. What's your attitude towards this issue, and what should be the language of the politicians? Well, I'm not sure about politicians. I guess it's up to them to choose. But of course, everyone should have right to choose the language of communication, the one you're used to using, the one that is pleasant, the one you want your kids to speak. You want them to be educated and professionally. Naturally, knowledge of any additional languages enriches people. The more languages one speaks, the better. So when a person lives in a country and does not speak the language of this country, that is, of course, a serious limiting factor. But no one should be discriminated by the language. No one should attempt to artificially narrow down the area of application of this or that language. In this case, I'm referring to Russian language in Latvia and Estonia. We believe that recommendations of international organizations must be honored. Such recommendations were passed on many occasions. Council of Europe High Commissioner on Human Rights, or OSCE Minorities High Commissioner, or Special Rapporteur of Racial Discrimination Committee. A number of such recommendations were passed on Latvia. And when former president of this country visited Russian Federation, he promised to at least find solution to the issue, making sure that kids of non-citizens would be recognized as citizens automatically. Another recommendation had to do with making sure that non-citizens would be allowed to take part as voters, at least at elections at municipal level.
So that they could have a chance to vote in those who would be governing their municipality. And automatically, those people should be taken to citizens who were given to people there. I've seen those passports of these people. They cite them as aliens, strangers. That's inconceivable today in Europe to have such a segment of citizens and such a situation when the citizens of any country in European Union, the Portuguese, let's say, would visit Latvia, would stay there for 6 months. We already would have a right to vote in somebody in municipality, but those who are born there, residing there, those citizens don't have such a right. Well, everybody is clear about the fact that's not fair, that's not right. Now, concerning the referendum, certainly this is an initiative of the Russian-speaking citizens dictated by their strive for justice. The outcomes of a referendum, I will not try to forecast those. Approximately, I might have a guess about it, but what really matters is that people want to be heard. They want their right to talk, think, upbring their kids in their native language, be respected, and that's absolutely a European value as such. And by all means, the legal possibilities of the European Union as a whole could be used there, which you've referred to. So I count on it that through, whether it be a referendum or through the understanding of the need to do it, anyway, the Russian language will be preserved, will be honored. Incidentally, it's not just a historical, cultural, literary value as such, but as a means allowing you to broaden the possibilities for the citizens with regards to finding jobs. Many ethnic Latvians speak very good Russian, and they have no problems about that. That helps them in their career. The Kommersant newspaper, please. Good afternoon, Sergey. Sergey Lavrov, Kommersant newspaper. In your introductory word, you've cited U.S.-Russia relations as one of the key tracks of your foreign policies of Russia. And indeed, over 4 years of Medvedev in presidency, these relations were flourishing, literally speaking. But at the end of the last year, some political figures in Russia expressed concern concerning the problem of missile defense you referred to. What's the probability that the compromise will not be found with regards to MD? You cannot perceive that as yet. And this notorious arms race and all the legacy of the past, are they at the horizon? Well, I don't think there is any justification to talk about the next arms race. And the Cold War is over. We are no longer being on the different sides of interaction. We are cooperating, and I don't think it's our choice, and I don't think that sensible politicians in U.S. would like confrontation there. I understand your question is dictated by the statement of the 23rd of November by President Medvedev, where he laid down our position concerning the measures in response to if and when U.S. would continue to deploy this MD in Europe in the configuration which might as well create threats for the Russian strategic forces. Our position is clear and understandable. If in our vicinity they will deploy the weapons which could potentially deprive our possibilities, destroy the parity in military terms, then we'll have to respond with the measures which will not allow such thing to lessen our ability there to happen. But it's more difficult to understand our partners. They say that their plans, in effect, in Europe are not aimed at disrupting this parity strategically. Their plan is to protect themselves from missiles, which might eventually surface at the territory beyond Europe. But at the same time, when we provide them a possibility to think jointly about the situation, which could as well address this problem without undermining this strategic parity, they decline that proposal. And stemming from our talks with the American colleagues, as a minimum, they do not exclude the possibility that MD they are setting forth there would have capabilities which might create risks for our strategic forces. As a minimum, they don't exclude there. I'm not saying that it's their objective, but knowing their characteristics, they don't exclude that could create risks to us. As a maximum there, though, which I hope is not their purpose, such deployment incidentally addresses the task to undermine the strategic parity. Having said that, as any other responsible state in the matters of security, we are aimed at not declaration words, but at specific deeds. And as the President said himself, our response will be in a clear-cut, commensurate aspect as regards to the European segment of missile defense of US in the process of its deployment. Mr. Medvedev, in a clear-cut language, stressed the point that these measures will be built on the basis of real development events and at every upcoming stage of the American plan. Our dialogue is still in process and in progress. We've touched upon that day before yesterday at the meeting with the first Under-Secretary of State, Bill Burns, and the new ambassador of US, Michael Mikefall, in Russia. My deputy Repkov, on a regular basis, has been in touch with his colleague, Tauscher, on this subject. Our dialogue is in progress with NATO as well. Therefore, basically, there is still time to deal with these acute problems. But it's not limitless. And I hope there is a will not to allow that to happen, that this MD issue in our relationships would be blown out of proportion, as they ascribe to it the language of the epoch of confrontation. And I hope that the American partners will exercise a restrained, constructive approach and will be able to find out the way out of this impasse. And to do that, we need to be heard out, and our legitimate concerns should be adequately met. Colleagues, we've been working for almost 2 hours now. Should we continue? Yes, we should. Okay, let's do it. Please, colleague, the floor is yours. Shall-Fit Norway Television. Regarding the investment climate in Russia. Now, on the 29th, Gazprom, French Total, and Norwegian Total for once again have deferred the solution of the question concerning investment in the Barents Sea. It's one of the major projects of Russia, and they have deferred it because the taxation policy in Russia is not favorable for this project. Does one need to improve the taxation regime? I think we need to improve it. Both the president and the government thinking along the same lines about it, and they are dealing with it. I'm not immediately involved in this effort. That's a corporate process. As such, they adopt these decisions, members of that consortium, on the basis of analysis of the commercial indices and on the basis of their own calculations. Therefore, we tend to believe that both the tax climate needs to be improved, and we shouldn't impede the corporate partners to adopt their own decisions. When will it be made with regards to improvement of this regime? First, consistently it's being improved, this taxation regime, and basically the terms and conditions for operation of foreign and Russian entrepreneurs. I will not establish artificial time frame. It's not my prerogative. The Minister of Economic Development and the government as a whole deals with that. The news agency. Do you have your own interest in that effort? No, Nord Stream. And a general approach. The microphone is off. High-tech. We're probably ahead of the time with our high-tech gadgets here. RIA Novosti, Yelena Yamisheva. Sergey Viktorovich, tell us, please, in the light of the events of the last year in the Middle East and North Africa, which have been discussed thoroughly today, can we say that the U.S. currently have changed their tactics in world politics and don't strive to always play the leader's role? Do you think that Russia today needs to change her tactics with respect to her relations with other countries, including U.S., and to shift the impetus from the military political aspect to business and humanitarian relationship as such? And second question, in the year 2011, last year, that is, some of our compatriots which have been residing for a long while abroad and have dual citizenship face the problem with the change of Russian passports. In particular, they had problems with the general consulate in Germany. In this regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, as far as I know, started to carry out inquiry. And do we expect that in result of such inquiry, the problem of change of passports will never reoccur? And will such problems of change of passports abroad be dealt with by the Foundation of Protection of Rights of Compatriots Abroad? Thank you. Well, be patient, please, to get my answers. First question. Probably you are referring here while talking about the fact that allegedly Americans are trying to, say, figuratively reach something through the means of others. And American politologists today are putting forward the concept of leading from behind. That's leadership from the second row, from the position at the back of others. And this position was first expressed during the Libyan events, when basically it was invented, this term was invented to more precisely characterize the role of European partners, not U.S. But the U.S. were not partners on the margins. First, fully they used their potential when they put out of effect the Libyan air defense, and subsequently they provided their partners of Europe with the intelligence and fire support, with the use of drones and otherwise. Basically, they were having the situation under control as commanders. No doubts about that. We've analyzed all of these things, and this is probably why this acute reaction were expressed by Americans with respect of our proposal in UN to make inquiry of the death of civil citizens in Libya during the flights of the planes there, including kids. And we tried to take a look at the scenario of developments of Syrian, so we tried to warn our partners in America and Europe, so we don't want repetition of this Libyan scenario of the military involvement, no matter who controls the events and from where. Now, while talking about the Arabian world as a whole, we certainly understand that the U.S. do have a wide-ranging interest there. Like other major states in the world would, and it serves our common interest that the aspiration of the peoples of that region to reform the societies would be translated into reality peacefully, without turbulence, shocks, so that such shocks artificially be used or created with the calculation about the big war to surface there, so that they would be constitutionally evolved with a broad dialogue of populace without imposing anything from outside too. And as regards the second part of your first question here, concerning the giving embodiment to our dialogue with the U.S. over 20 years, we've turned this dialogue beyond the exclusively military political subject which was dominating our dialogue during the Cold War. I've just referred to the fact that over the last 3 years the Presidential Commission has been very active. 20 working groups have been established, encompassing all across the board all the spheres, from traditional problems of international security up to interaction of civil society. More than half of those groups are aimed at developing scientific, economic development, including agriculture, energy, atomic energy, innovations, outer space, and many other things. Last year, incidentally, our turnover reached the record level over $30 billion US worth of investment. Exchange has been broadened, and now it's really becoming a two-way traffic street. Now, in America, Lukoil is very active. Severstal, too, they're buying assets there, including their competitiveness being upgraded. And we have assessed the active support given by U.S. for our accession to WTO, which also enriches the agenda of our bilateral cooperation with that country. Humanitarian contacts are being widened, too. In November, we concluded an agreement which soon become effective to make easier mutual visits and travels, which provide for guest, tourist, and business multiple visas up to 3 years time frame with the possibility of non-suspended stay in the country for 6 months, which is very substantial, to invigorate our exchanges there. And I would think that this should become a pathway to fully visa-free exchange with the U.S. We've put forward this initiative already. Therefore, and cultural, yes, cultural sphere too of our interaction is not restricted to solely signing such agreements. Either we'll observe various jubilees like Fort Ross in California. We're getting in place a very big program. Now, of course, there are problems like MD and adoption. We have signed an agreement as to how one needs to be responsible for the destinies of kids being adopted. Soon it will become effective regularly. We've been posing these questions during our meetings. On Monday, I've mentioned this to Bill Burns, since even if it's very solely cases, very isolated cases, but behind each isolated case there is a life of a kid and destiny. Those who killed adopted children, who are violating their rights and who are raping them, and if they are given artificial terms to do time after course, that's a mockery of the process. 60,000 adoptions, Hillary Clinton said, only a dozen of cases, or 20 maybe. That's not an answer. And prior to this agreement becoming effective, and according to that agreement, the Department of State will be responsible, basically, for the destinies and lots of each given child, at least to take an oversight over the process of them being adopted in the family. So we'll address our judicial system together with Astakov, who is the responsible representative of our President of Kids, so that we could probably freeze this process of adoption of our kids by Americans prior to that agreement becoming effective. So our interaction is not limited to military strategical matters, and I think this trend will be further pursued and reinforced. Now, concerning documentation and change of passports of our citizens abroad, according to our legislation, the existence of citizenship abroad by a Russian citizen is not an impediment to document and to have the new passport in place. And the citizen who has dual citizenship can obtain such a passport. Hereby will consider him solely as a citizen of Russia. Any country would do it. And our purpose is so that the address of the citizens of Russia to consulate should be done promptly without any hindrance. And you should remember that in Germany, there is the largest diaspora group of Russian citizens beyond CIS.
So, we try to make sure then, when there are any complications, we try to reduce them to the minimum. Yes, we do receive complaints in our consulates, but we consider them vigorously when needed. Indeed, disciplinary checks have been taken, but they show that it is not always the fault of consulate officers. Sometimes it's just that an applicant failed to provide full set of documents, or applicants voluntarily or not give false data, maybe just by mistake. So from your question, I understand that you're probably referring to, or rather, your question largely has to do with people that did not timely replace their passport. So if they go to consulates to replace passports after the passport has expired, reissuing a new passport would require more time naturally. So what I could recommend, do it timely. If you know that your passport is expiring in a couple of months, go to the consulate now. Don't wait for it to expire, because otherwise it will take longer. Once a passport has expired, additional time is needed to do all the checkups, to make sure that a person is still a Russian citizen. So once again, don't linger, just do it. As regards the foundation of support and protection of compatriots, its charter does not provide for any support in issuing foreign passports. Its sole purpose and its goals were formulated on the basis of proposals tabled by the diaspora member states that were voiced at the Congress of Compatriots that took place in Moscow. So the goal is to monitor the legal status of compatriot, maintaining ties and exchanging information with various human rights and civil society organizations, providing methodology, information, legal support and assistance, or even financial assistance, for instance, through finding lawyers in case rights of our compatriots are violated. One of the priorities would, of course, be protecting right for the mother tongue. We are now completing and finalizing the documents needed to allocate budgetary funding, about $150 million. Well, no, that's a dream. That's a Freudian slip. It's my dream. 150 million rubles. Over 120 out of them will be used for various programs, and the rest will be overhead and administrative costs. But once again, those are the functions that are now prescribed in the Charter, but as life goes on, I still don't think that it will be reissuing passports, but it will definitely have some new additional functions. I'm ready to take 2 more questions. Imedi, question to you. Sergey Viktorovich, how do you see the prospects of Russian-Georgian relations in the year 2012? You mentioned that it will be an intense, politically intense and difficult year. Will outside factors have impact on relations? Obama and Saakashvili will be having their meetings very soon, and then, once again, it's a difficult year with forthcoming presidential elections. Well, if it was up to us, then there would be no obstacles whatsoever for the development of relations along many tracks. We gave reasons on many occasions why our interaction with Mikhail Saakashvili is not possible. I'm sure everyone remembers, so I will not dwell on that in greater detail. When someone's interested in expanding our ties, even in difficult situation, now that since 2008, Georgian initiative diplomatic relations were disrupted, any such proposals are met in a very constructive way. Energy companies do cooperate on the basis of pragmatic approach, guided by their business interests of their consumers, by expanding aviation communication last year. In addition to traditional routes that were created a couple of years ago, new ones were added. That is being done on the basis of arrangements between aviation authorities and air carriers from Russia and from Georgia, respectively. So generally, we do not want to create unnecessary complications and impede communication between our citizens. By the way, a lot is being done in the humanitarian sector. For instance, actors, theater, cinema actors, directors exchange visits, stage their plays, and we support them in every way we can. Humanitarian needs are always honored when a person needs to visit his family or go to a wedding or a funeral. In trade, like I'm sure you've heard, we could look for potential partners proactively to make sure that Georgian products are sold in Russia and Russian products are sold in Georgia, respectively. Nothing is impossible, but of course we are concerned with the Georgian policy, trying to position Russia as an enemy of the Georgian people and to educate the younger generation in Georgia and sow the seeds of hostility for the years to come. I was struck, literally, by one of the statements of Mikhail Saakashvili. Any statement basically he makes just puzzles you. But I'm referring to the one when he said that the Georgian Treaty was the first case of occupation of Georgia by the Russian Empire. It made me laugh at first, but then I thought that this is probably what they teach kids in Georgian schools. And this is horrible when pages of our joint history are being twisted that way. When Georgia was trying to protect itself from aggressive neighbors and Russia saved it and supported, and once they portray this by completely twisting the situation, it's just dramatic. We've seen that prior to the World War II, and we hope that Georgian authorities will be guided by their true interest and will not try to actually raise hostilities. Now, the most difficult moment at the news conference, the last question to the Ukrainian colleagues. We have more than one Ukrainian journalist. Well, first come, first served. Question from all Ukrainian journalists. It's not a provocative question. Oh, please. Oh, please. If I may, two questions then. Mr. Onyshenko is now an active player in Russian-Ukrainian relations. For instance, he is now fighting against Ukrainian cheese. So my question is that the beginning of the trade war between Russia and Ukraine? Maybe you could list more Ukrainian goods that will have difficulties entering Russian market or the market of the single economic space. And my second question, and I can't really resist the temptation of once again referring to gas. Yesterday, Ukrainian Prime Minister said that despite the fact that we have a contract, Ukraine is not planning on purchasing all the gas it should be purchasing in accordance with the contract. What would economic implications be? And yet, another question, why is Russia opposing to trilateral consortia Russia, Ukraine, European Union? Thank you. I'm not directly involved in those matters, like you rightly mentioned. In case of gas, it's the gas companies that are dealing with that. As regards policy decisions, it's up to prime ministers to decide. As regards to sanitary and phytosanitary norms, relevant bodies are dealing with that. And of course, it's not the extensive list of complications we have in our relations. They're more numerous. For instance, an issue that concerns many Russian companies whose property is being nationalized or acquired through raids. These are economic problems that must be resolved within legal framework using the court of arbitrage. Gas contracts is a bright example, and there's nothing I could comment. I don't think you gave correct description of the situation with Russian position on the future gas transportation system of Ukraine. Those matters are being seriously debated. If we want to be close partners, then we'll have to take each other's interest into account. I can assure you that politically, without giving into commercial details, I can assure you that Russia stands ready to take full account of Ukrainian interests, provided Ukrainian friends take our legitimate interest into account. Once again, I'm not in charge of those matters. It is not in my scope of competence. What we're dealing with is international cooperation. I I'd like to inform you that within the next couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken, within the next month, I'm not sure about the date, another meeting of Subcommittee of International Affairs will be hosting it in Nizhny Novgorod. And Consulate General of Ukraine will be inaugurated in Nizhny Novgorod. It was time to coincide, and we'll discuss a whole range of international affairs, including Transnistria. That was already mentioned here, since Russia and Ukraine are not only mediators together with OSCE, we're also guarantor states of the process. So I wouldn't over-dramatize the situation, the current status of our economic relations. The closer the relations, the more specific problems and issues there are. And one should not be over-dramatic. One should honor the existing arrangements between companies or states, be that gas contract or contract for acquisition of a company, and one should act within legal framework. This is our approach. Can I ask for a clarification? Oh, right, but not a question, a clarification. Alexei Onishuk from the Reuters. Once again, going back to Iran. Do you think there is high probability that the US and allies might start a military operation against Iran this year already? And how would Russia respond, since Iran is really our close neighbor? Well, as regards the probability of this disaster happening, well, you should probably ask this question to those that mention that this is an option that is still on the table. The consequences will be dire. We are seriously concerned with this possibility, because the first outcome would be refugees, huge flows of refugees to the Russian Federation, to Azerbaijan, or through Azerbaijan, and we need to keep that in mind. But this is just one part of the problem, and probably not the most important part of the problem. It will not be an easy walk. Calculating all implications is impossible. It will definitely fuel the dormant conflict and opposition between Sunni and Shiites. I'm confident in that. And then the chain reaction that will start, there's no saying how it will end. And I will not make any prediction of forecasts as to when that might happen, since we're doing everything possible to make sure that does not happen. Thank you very much for